competitiveness, because I feel like, Alex Boone, it is worth rehashing a little bit about what happens on the sidelines with guys who compete the way that Stefon Diggs competes. And we see something in slow motion of someone yelling, and especially when it comes to certain players, wide receivers specifically, it always seems to be taken as, well, this guy must be having a meltdown. He must be demanding the ball. And there is breaking news here that all receivers are not Terrell Owens, right?
Or AB.
Right, exactly. And so, yes, the way he acted in week 4 was unacceptable, to just not show up for practice. Of course it was. And I'm sure some of those meltdowns on the sideline are frustrating at times for teammates, but at the same time, the way that he competes is how he goes from a 5th-round pick to a superstar NFL wide receiver.
Absolutely. And I think that sometimes you have to understand that most guys are emotional because it is a physical sport and you're asked to do so much. And when you don't, when the outcome isn't exactly how you expect it, and sometimes it doesn't even have to be with like him getting the ball. Sometimes it's just the way the game's going, the flow of the game. Like guys get upset and there's a lot of yelling. I think that nowadays it's shown more than it used to be, because back in the day there used to be like fist fights on the sidelines and guys would but you never saw it because they never showed the sides. But now all of a sudden, hey, listen, we know that the Vikings sideline can get a little crazy. So if it does get a little crazy, start showing it, no matter what they're saying, because they never really tell you what they're saying. How do you know they're not out there screaming at you like, dude, you're doing a great job. I am so proud of you. Like, you never know what they're saying. And sometimes they're just yelling because, number one, it's loud in the stadium. Number two, you're really excited and hyped up and you can't tell how loud it is. So you're just yelling because that's how the game's going. There's so many things that go into it. And I think that as much as people look at it as a negative thing, like, my God, he's starting a fight, a lot of times it's just like, hey, man, we're good. We need to go. We need, it's guys pushing you to be like, hey, we're okay. Or maybe something's bothering you and he's just letting you know, bro, it's okay. We have to move on. We don't have time for this. And it comes off in a different light.
And one of the NFL Films cameras or mics picked up Diggs on the sideline of the Saints game, and he looked like he was losing it. And what he was really saying was to Kirk, trust me, keep looking my way, go through your progressions, trust yourself, stuff like that. That's just, it's not anything exceptional. It's what guys say to each other. Right. But it's also, in a hyped up fashion. So it looks like he's calling out his quarterback or something else. And I think just like with the Instagram thing, we take a little tiny bit of information and assume we know absolutely everything about a guy and about where he stands. And I talked to BC Johnson for quite a while about the 7th round draft pick, about how every day he and Stefon Diggs are working together. He's learning from Stefon Diggs. He's watching him run routes. He's teaching him things in film sessions and everything else. That's the way a lot of teammates look at him. And I think his public persona, he's had a very, difficult time maybe knowing how to express himself publicly. Even when the week 4 thing, he comes out and does his little fake cough. It's like, okay, man, no one's really going to buy that. But even on Twitter, it's always been that way. He's not one of those guys who's really natural about expressing himself on Twitter. And so it's always been kind of cryptic and weird tweets. And I guess I look at him as, through the Vikings' eyes, if I'm in the front office, I'm not seeing this guy as a problem at all. I'm seeing him as much more of, what can we do to make this work? Because if we can't figure this out, that's going to be a major problem for our team, because you're good and people like playing with you.
Like we just said, there's nothing wrong with a playmaker wanting the ball to be a playmaker. Like, so many people look at that, and don't get me wrong, there are times where there is frustration, and I think so many people, and I don't know if it's because it's 2020 or what, but they just can't handle like an open fight. And so you see two guys fighting and you're like, my God, that's crazy. In the NFL, that's like every other day. Mm-hmm. They're fighting with somebody constantly. Because
training camp all the time. People
yelling at each other. All the time. It's how it goes. It's the way the game is. It's how one alpha talks to another alpha. And it's like, listen, I know you're not going to listen to me unless I talk really loud and kind of look at you really mean, because you don't think I'm serious, but now I'm getting serious. And you used to see it all the time, but the media blows this up. And I think a lot of it is directed at Kurt, because number one, his relationship with Zim. And obviously we know Zim's kind of like up and down about it, but the way that goes, all of a sudden people want to put this narrative out that Kirk's not the team, that they, the team player they thinks he is, or the franchise. So instantly when someone's talking to him, like, remember last year when Thielen was trying to, hey, listen, I'm showing you my hand motion. Like I did this and then I did one of these and you weren't there for it. And like, that's, hey, listen, you need to hit me when I'm open. There's nothing wrong with that. This football, he's pissed. He ran a route perfectly and the ball wasn't there. I'd be pissed too. Diggs is the same way, but more emotion. He's one of these guys that gets super fired up before the games. I used to love Diggs before a game because you don't see receivers like that. Normally you see him kind of dancing around, doing their thing. They're in their own little world. Like, yo, yeah, totally. Diggs is more like an offensive lineman. He's dancing around, but running into people and like headbutting you. And you're like, all right, this guy is for real today. We better get him the ball. And I'm glad you said that because if you don't get your playmakers the ball, don't expect to go very far in the playoffs. Like he's one of the guys in the league. He has to be first in deep balls? I think I heard somebody say that. Like he's incredible.
20 plus balls that traveled more than 20 plus. Yeah.
Okay, we need to get him the ball more. I don't know what else to say. Like we got to start coming up with better concepts. We got to start coming up with a better offense for our playmakers because when you don't, you kind of do have a right to turn around and go, "Hey man, I'm getting a little pissed over here." Not because you're not getting me the ball, but because we're not winning. And I could help us win, and so could he, and we're just not really doing a lot of this. And I get that sometimes we have to run the ball, but we have to be more creative in how we do it going forward.
Yeah, and if you're Gary, I'm not sure. I'm not saying that Mike Zimmer didn't respect Kevin Stefanski. But I think there's just a different level with Gary because of everything he has done in the NFL. So I think the offense should just be entirely up to Gary. And he should be saying, all right, Stefon, what can we do here? Because lining up on the outside and running deep routes every single time is not the best usage of Stefon Diggs. I think you have to use him in both short passing and the deep passing game to make sure he's getting the ball in his hands because it's super efficient. When you look at the numbers, no matter how he's been used, it's really efficient and a great idea to throw it his way.
Agreed. And I think that he's one of these guys that when you get him the ball right away and you just say, hey, listen, here's a whole bunch of open space, do what you want to do. That's where he's naturally going to be creative. That's when he's like the Stefon Diggs that you want to see. Yeah, he's great running a huge 20-yard dig route or a deep post or whatever. But every now and then you got to get him the ball sooner. And it can't be these silly gimmick plays that everybody knows is coming. Like you have to be on the next step of creativity. How am I going to get some of the greatest playmakers in this league the ball? Well, I'm just going to somehow hand it to him. I'm going to throw it to him. I'm going to start throwing more slants. I'm going to start throwing more screens to him. I'm going to start developing this offense, not only around my run game, because we've said this before. There are already people going into next year and have already sat down watching film like, we got to stop the run. So now while they're worried about the run, make them worried about more than just the run. Make them worried about Diggs getting the ball. How do we stop Diggs? How do we stop Thielen? How do we stop Irv Smith Jr. or Rudolph? Or you have so many weapons at your disposal, and yet you're just like, okay, we're going to play action as simple as this. And, and as the year went on, it got more creative, but it still wasn't there because Diggs didn't get the ball enough and Thielen didn't. And I know Thielen was hurt, but when he's out there, I mean, you got to somehow you should have been toasting defenses. And it never really showed up. So I think that's why, like you said, Zim has more respect for Coops. Number one, because he's older and he's been around the block more. He's been a head coach of Super Bowl teams. I mean, he's done all the things that you need to do to hit all the Hall of Fame requisites of being a coach. And so now all of a sudden you're like, hey, listen, it's completely up to you. So I think there's a little bit more pressure on Kubiak that people give him credit for because all these things are slowly happening to him. Like, hey, we don't have a running back right now. We receiver needs the ball more, and not because he's upset, but just because naturally, if we want to win games, we need to get him the ball. So there is more pressure on the OC right now.
Yeah, no, that's a good